I was sitting at the small dining table in my apartment, on the outskirts of Seattle, having just set my coffee cup down when the door opened. Mark, the husband I had lived with for over 20 years, walked in. He didn't ask how I was, nor did he look at me for more than a second. Instead, he placed a white business card on the table, the print crisp and clear: Attorney Daniel Scott, specializing in divorce. Mark's voice was cold enough to cut. "We're done here. I've filed the papers. Once it's finalized, you'll get $1,000 a month in alimony. Consider me generous." Beside him stood Rachel, my best friend since high school. She looped her arm through Mark's, her gaze defiant. Rachel's smile felt like an icy blade driven straight into my chest. I looked at the card, then raised my head with a faint smile. "Fine. Divorce it is." My calm reply made Mark pause for half a second, but he quickly turned to Rachel, and they exchanged a look as if they'd just won. They thought I would cry, beg, or at least lose my composure. They were completely wrong. Mark had never been a deep thinker, and that was his fatal weakness. I knew him well, and this time it would work in my favor. I would turn this betrayal into the first step of a plan that, just thinking about it, made my heart beat slower with satisfaction. I was 45 years old, a children's book author and illustrator. My work wasn't flashy, but it was enough to support me, and more importantly, I loved it. On quiet, late nights, I would sit by the window drawing while listening to the rain on the roof, the only peaceful moments in a marriage that had been cracking for years. Mark and Rachel had once been the people I trusted most. We grew up together in a small coastal town. As a teenager, Rachel was known for her beauty and her love of conquest. She had an odd habit taking other women's boyfriends, then discarding them once she was bored. I once thought it was just a reckless phase, and as the years passed, I naively believed she had grown out of it. I'd known Mark before, but it wasn't until I was preparing to leave for college in another city that he confessed his feelings. I was surprised not only because I thought he was interested in Rachel, but because I had secretly liked him for years. After a few days of thought and a talk with Rachel, I said yes. It was one of those decisions I believed would change my life, and it did, just not in the way I had hoped. Now, seeing the two of them standing side by side in front of me, I realized all the signs had been there for a long time. The late-night calls just to check in on an old friend, the group hangouts that somehow ended with the two of them disappearing at the same time, the times Mark came home late with the excuse of helping Rachel with something urgent. I had brushed it all aside, thinking I was being paranoid. Mark tilted his chin as if to wrap things up quickly. "So, we're agreed. Sign the papers, take the money, and we're done." I gave a small nod, my voice calm, but my eyes sharp. "Sure. Do it your way." They didn't know that, in that very moment, I locked a door inside myself, a door that had held a shred of hope and forgiveness. Behind it, there was only cold determination. I wouldn't just walk away from this marriage. I would make them pay for every second they had treated me with contempt. As Mark and Rachel left the apartment, I picked up the business card, and studied the name on it carefully. In my mind, the steps of my plan began to line up neatly, like the colors I placed on a canvas. Each brushstroke would be a calculated move, and the finished painting, the image of them stripped of everything they had once flaunted with pride. Rachel and I had known each other since the days we still wore high school uniforms. In the small coastal town where we grew up, everyone knew Rachel, the blonde girl, with a dazzling smile and blue eyes that always seemed to be plotting some new mischief. But anyone who had known her long enough understood that behind the charming exterior was a bad habit. She liked to take other women's men, only to discard them once she was bored. Years ago, I had seen more than one friend's relationship crumble simply because Rachel showed up at the right moment. Back then, I told myself she would grow out of it with maturity. I was wrong. After graduation, I married Mark when I was 25. Life seemed peaceful until Rachel introduced her fiancé, a man named David, a few years older than us, working at a major tech company in San Francisco. David was polite, calm, and instantly likable. I truly thought Rachel was lucky to have found someone like him. In the early years of Rachel's marriage, The four of us often spent holidays or vacations together. Sometimes we drove across state lines, other times we met for dinner at well-known restaurants. I never thought twice when Mark and Rachel laughed, a little too much together, trusting that a friendship that long could not be misunderstood. Things began to change in the second year after Rachel's wedding, when she announced she was pregnant. From then on, Mark seemed to turn into a different person. He quit smoking just because Rachel said she couldn't stand the smell. He volunteered to take her to her checkups, even taking time off work to accompany her to the hospital. I remember one evening as Mark was arranging his schedule. I asked, "Don't you think David might mind you going with Rachel all the time?" Mark frowned. "You're always thinking the worst. Rachel is a mutual friend. She asked for help, should I just ignore her?" I tried to keep my voice calm. "Helping is fine, but going with her to prenatal checkups, isn't that her husband's responsibility? You're going too often." It looks like Mark cut me off sharply. "Looks like what you can't have children. So why are you bothered by me being there for a baby that's about to be born?" That sentence hit me like a hammer to the chest. We had never wanted children, or at least I thought we hadn't. For the first time, I began to wonder when Mark's feelings had changed. From the moment Emma, Rachel's daughter, was born, Mark's presence around them only grew. He went to Rachel's house 3 or 4 times a week, always with the excuse that David is away on business or Rachel needs help watching Emma for a few hours. At first, I reassured myself it was only temporary. But as time passed, that temporary became routine. One spring day, when Emma was 6, Mark stood in front of the closet, rummaging through his suits, the ones he only wore for client meetings. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "Deciding which one to wear tomorrow for Emma's kindergarten graduation," Mark replied casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I froze. "David's not going. He can't make it. Rachel wants me to stand in for him." "Don't you think this is a bit too much?" I asked, my voice rising. Mark looked at me like I had just said something absurd. "Are you serious? It's just kindergarten graduation. Why are you making it a big deal?" I stayed quiet, but inside the storm was building. I knew David loved his daughter, so why would he let Mark take on that role? From that day, the frequency of Mark and Rachel's meetings increased even more. From babysitting and school drop-offs, they moved on to attending school events together, parent-teacher meetings, and even taking family-style photos with Mark standing beside Rachel, like a proud father. I felt like I had been pushed out, nothing more than a bystander in my own marriage. I couldn't have a frank talk with Rachel. The one time I called to ask, she scoffed. "Oh, Natalie, you're too sensitive. I just need someone reliable to help, that's all." "You should thank Mark." When I pressed about whether David knew, Rachel dodged the question. "What happens between David and me is none of your business." Her answer chilled me. It was far too casual, as if she knew exactly what she was hiding. From that moment, I started watching more closely. Every look Mark gave Rachel, every touch that crossed the line of what an old friend should allow. I didn't know exactly when they had gone too far, but I knew one thing: it was no longer just friendship. And I also knew that to uncover the truth, I would need more than a vague gut feeling. That night, while Mark and Rachel were taking Emma out to dinner, as they always said, I was home alone when I heard a knock at the door. Opening it, I saw David, Rachel's husband, standing there. His face looked tired, but his eyes carried a strange kind of determination. "Sorry for showing up unannounced, Natalie," he said, his voice low and steady. "I think it's time we talked." I invited him in. David set his laptop on the table and opened it without hesitation. On the screen was a map, dotted with red markers. "I installed GPS on Rachel's car a few months ago," he said, eyes fixed on the display. "Look, this is her route for the last 3 weeks." I leaned closer. The same location, a hotel over 20 miles from our homes, appeared again and again. The most chilling part was the pattern: 3 times a week, usually in the early evening, each stay lasting several hours. David tilted his head toward me. "I've checked. Every time Rachel says she's with Mark, the GPS leads straight there." I swallowed hard. Even though my gut had warned me for a long time, seeing undeniable proof still hit me like a punch. "What are you planning to do?" I asked. "At first I wanted to confront them right away," David admitted. "But then I thought I don't want Emma to see any of this. She's only 8. I can't let her be hurt." His words made me fall silent. Emma, she might not be my biological child, but I genuinely cared for her. Deep down, I knew David was right. We sat down and discussed it carefully. If we acted rashly, things would explode, and Emma would be the first casualty. But if we stayed silent too long, Mark and Rachel would only push further. In the end, we agreed gather more evidence enough to be undeniable, but wait until the safest moment to expose it. From that day, I started a new routine, meticulously noting every time Mark was out the excuses he gave, and cross-checking them with the GPS logs David sent. We found restaurant receipts, liquor store bills, and even a blurry photo of Mark and Rachel walking into the hotel. Every piece of evidence felt like another knife to the chest, but I told myself the more it hurts now, the sweeter the payback will be. Once David and I sat in a cafe near the park, talking like co-workers preparing for a top-secret project. He pulled up security camera footage from the hotel Rachel, standing at a door knocking lightly, then Mark opening it and pulling her inside. No kissing caught on camera, but intimate enough to leave no room for doubt. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding, but my voice steady. "Keep everything. When the time comes, one strike will be all it takes to end them." David nodded. "But remember, Emma comes first. We wait at least until she's old enough to understand." I agreed, though I knew the waiting wouldn't be easy. Every time I saw Mark laughing with Rachel in front of me, I had to bite my tongue to keep from blurting the truth. One afternoon, right after Mark left the house for a so-called client meeting, I got a text from David Hotel. "Room 512. Both just went in." I sat still for a moment, staring at the words, then deleted the message. I knew I had to hold back. Day by day, I saw more clearly the falseness in every gesture Mark made. He came home smelling of unfamiliar perfume shirt buttons, undone yet chatting like nothing was wrong. Rachel kept playing the role of the caring friend, occasionally sending me photos of Emma with the message, "She misses you so much." I would reply with only a few short words, keeping my outward calm. But inside, the layers of my plan were taking shape, precise, patient, and certain. David and I both knew when the moment was ripe, everything would collapse in a single day. And when that happened, not only would Mark and Rachel pay the price, but anyone who thought they could toy with someone's trust would finally understand sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's preparation for a strike with no way back. Just a few months after David and I began gathering evidence, my body started sounding alarms. At first it was only fatigue and dizziness, but then sharp pains in my chest became more frequent. I thought it was just the stress from work and family matters, but when I went for a checkup, the doctor told me I had a serious congenital heart condition that had progressed and would require long-term treatment. I might have to stay in the hospital for at least a year. I remember that day it was raining steadily in Seattle. Holding the test results, I called Mark, hoping he would at least ask how I was or show some concern. But his voice over the phone was indifferent. "Yeah, just do what the doctor says. I'm busy. I'll stop by another day." That another day stretched into a month. During the early weeks of my hospitalization, Mark only showed up a handful of times each visit, lasting no more than 10 minutes. He never asked about my progress, only tossed out a few polite phrases before leaving with the excuse of urgent business. Emma, on the other hand, 14 at the time, visited often. She would bring me colorful comic magazines I liked and sit telling stories about her school life. I thought our bond would only grow stronger, but after her 15th birthday, things changed. She became distant and her visits grew fewer. When I asked why, she only gave a short reply, "I'm busy with school. Don't worry about me." I didn't believe that was the whole truth, but I didn't want to push. Inside, I felt a growing emptiness, not only from Mark's indifference, but also from Emma's avoiding eyes. Then one afternoon, while I was reading by the hospital window, the door opened. Mark walked in, not with flowers or food, but with a thick yellow envelope in his hand. He set it on the table and pulled out a chair across from me. "This is the divorce paperwork," he said plainly without preamble. "I want this over as soon as possible. Sign it. I'll give you $1,000 a month in alimony." "That's fair." I let out a faint smirk. "Fair. You really believe that?" Mark shrugged, as if there was nothing more to discuss. "I don't want to drag this out. We're done. Just sign, and that's it." I looked at him for a few seconds, then picked up the pen and signed immediately. No arguing, no demands. His face showed a flicker of surprise, but he quickly gathered the papers and stood. "I'll file them this week," he said, then walked out. When the door closed, it felt like the room fell into absolute silence. But inside me, a fire was burning. Everything David and I had prepared for so long, it was time to move to the next step. I called David that evening and recounted the entire conversation. He only said we stick to the plan. Don't let them suspect anything. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. From now on, every expression I showed Mark would be one of acceptance and weakness, so he would believe he had won and lower his guard. In the days that followed, I told Mark I'd arranged to move some of my belongings out of the house and leave the rest to him. Meanwhile, I quietly contacted my own attorney, instructing them to handle all proceedings discreetly. When I thought of Mark, I no longer felt the same pain as before. Instead, there was the cold resolve of someone who had already chosen her path. I knew he wouldn't stop at the divorce. He would try to exploit my health for his benefit. And because of that, I would make sure to surprise him in a way he could never see coming. From my hospital room, I began sorting all my personal files, organizing the evidence David and I had collected over the past months. I left the hospital on a sunny morning, though it was only a temporary discharge for a few days to handle personal matters. David's car was already waiting, taking me straight to the suburban house where Mark and I had lived for over 10 years. But this time I wasn't returning to stay, I was there to end everything. That house on paper had never belonged to Mark. I bought it before our marriage using my savings and a small inheritance from my parents. When we married, we agreed not to include it as joint property. Mark knew this well, yet still treated it as our home, and never imagined the day he'd be forced to leave. I had quietly worked with my lawyer and a real estate agent. Just days after signing the divorce papers, the house was put under a quick sale contract for a young family. All the documents were complete. The only step left was to hand over the keys. That afternoon, while David and I were doing a final walk through, a black SUV screeched to a stop in front. Mark and Rachel stepped out. Both froze when they saw the SOLD sign on the lawn, as if doused in cold water. Mark stormed up, his voice sharp. "What is this? Who gave you the right to sell the house?" I stood tall, my expression calm. "My house in my name. I sell it whenever I choose." Rachel stepped in, forcing a smile. "Natalie, there must be some misunderstanding. This is where Mark lives. It's his home, too." I tilted my head, my voice gentle but edged with steel. "No, Rachel. I bought this house before the marriage. Mark was just staying here. There was never a lease agreement. I let him live here for free. That's over now." Mark's face flushed. He lowered his voice, but it was laced with frustration. "So now that you've sold it, where are we supposed to go? I don't have anywhere lined up." "I'm sure hotels still have vacancies," I replied, then turned to hand the keys to the agent. They stood frozen for a few seconds before Mark changed tactics. He stepped closer, his tone dripping with false softness. "All right, if you've sold it, then lend me some money to get a place. $11,000 will do. You've got it." I laughed. "You think I'm going to give you money from now on? All communication will go through my lawyer?" Rachel bristled. "You're just going to abandon us after all these years?" I cut her off. "After all these years, what have you done to hold on to a shred of decency? Don't pretend you've earned anything from me." Seeing I wouldn't budge, Mark raised his voice, threatening to tell everyone and ruin my reputation. I just shrugged. "Go ahead. But remember, I have something much bigger than any story you can make up." David stepped forward, positioning himself between us. "That's enough. If you stay here another minute, I'm calling the police." The words landed like an invisible slap. Mark and Rachel exchanged glances, then reluctantly headed back to their SUV. But before shutting the door, Mark threw out one last line. Just wait, Natalie. You'll regret this. I watched the SUV speed away, my heart completely still. In its place was a wave of relief. The first step was complete. They no longer had a free roof over their heads, and I had regained control over what was rightfully mine. That evening, my lawyer sent an email confirming that all communication requests from Mark would be redirected straight to their office. I smiled when I read the final line. They have no legal right to demand any money or property from you. A week after Mark and Rachel were forced to leave the house, I got a call from Linda, Mark's mother. Her voice was low, tinged with unease. Natalie, I've heard some troubling things. Can you come over and explain? I knew this was the perfect time to set every piece on the board into place. The next morning, I went to my former in-law's home. In the living room sat Mark and Rachel, both looking worn out, their eyes a mix of confusion and tension. My in-laws sat across from them, clearly waiting for answers. I began calmly. I think everyone here deserves to know the truth. The real reason Mark and I divorced wasn't just because we're incompatible, as he claims. Mark immediately cut in. Don't start making things up here, Natalie. I looked him straight in the eye. Then do you dare deny that you and Rachel have been involved behind David's and my back for years? The room seemed to freeze. Linda turned to her son, her gaze full of disappointment. Paul, my former father-in-law, spoke in a stern tone. Is that true? Mark stammered a few words, but Rachel broke in. We're together because of real feelings. The past doesn't matter. At that moment, a voice came from the doorway. Oh, it matters. Especially when neither of you has legally finalized your divorces. All eyes turned toward David. He stepped in carrying a folder. I saw Mark's face pale and Rachel froze, taking a step back. David set the folder on the table. Mark, your divorce papers with Natalie were never signed off by the court. You're still legally bound to her, yet you're openly living with Rachel. And Rachel hasn't finalized her divorce with me either. So how do you two explain that my former in-laws exchanged glances, their composure slipping? Linda turned to Rachel. Rachel, we treated you like family. And yet you, Rachel tried to regain her confident tone. We love each other, and Emma needs a real family. Emma, Rachel's daughter, had been sitting quietly in the corner, but suddenly spoke up. Her voice was firm, unwavering. My real family is with Dad, David. He's the one who's always been there for me, never missed an event, never lied to me. Rachel was taken aback. Emma, I'm your mother, but you've never cared about what I want. Emma cut her off, her eyes shimmering with tears but steady with resolve. I don't want to live with you and Mark. I choose to be with Dad. Linda reached out to embrace Emma, while Paul pointed at Mark and Rachel. You two have brought shame to this family. We'll talk later. I sat there, not needing to add another word of accusation. Everything I wanted to say had been confirmed by their own reactions. David gave me a subtle nod, a signal that we'd won this round. Mark looked at me, trying to salvage something. Natalie, can we talk in private? I answered flatly. There's nothing left to say. From now on, everything goes through my lawyer. The air in my ex-in-law's living room was still thick after the confrontation. Mark and Rachel sat hunched on the couch, while Emma remained tightly held by Linda. David stood next to me, silent but clearly in control of the situation. I knew this was the perfect moment to deliver my next blow, the one they would never see coming. I sat up straight, set my purse on the table, and pulled out a tablet. My fingers swiped a few times before I turned the screen toward Mark and Rachel. You probably believed I've been living off that $1,000 a month Mark gives me, right? I said calmly. And maybe you thought I'd be struggling with hospital bills, rent, and every other expense a heart patient freshly divorced with few options. But unfortunately for you, every one of your assumptions is wrong. The screen displayed my bank statement, monthly deposits from various sources, book royalties, international rights, film adaptation sales. The final number glared back at them, over $40,000 a month. Rachel's eyes went wide, her mouth opening, but no words coming out. Mark leaned forward, staring like he couldn't trust his own eyes. I'm currently a best-selling children's author in multiple states, I continued. My work has been translated into 6 languages, and a major studio is negotiating to turn it into a long-running animated series. My average annual income, $500,000. And it's still growing. Mark let out a dry, hollow laugh, his eyes unfocused. You're making this up to get back at me. I rotated the tablet back, opened an email from my literary agency, then pulled up the signed contract with the studio's signatures, seals, everything. You can read every page if you want, or have your lawyer verify it. Linda stayed quiet, but I noticed the corner of her mouth twitch upward as if suppressing a reaction. Paul didn't bother hiding his satisfaction, glancing at his son like he wanted to say, now, face the consequences yourself. Rachel regained some composure, leaning back. So, what money can't change what happened between me and Mark? I met her gaze, my tone low, but each word sharp as glass. Money can't change the truth, but it can buy justice. I will sue both of you for adultery and emotional damages. With my income, I can take this case as far as it needs to go. And I promise neither of you will walk out of court without paying. Mark shot to his feet. You can't do that. You're trying to destroy my life. I tilted my head, studying him like a stranger. No, Mark. You destroyed it yourself long ago. I'm just making sure you pay the right price. Rachel opened her mouth, but David cut in. If you'd like, I can submit every piece of evidence of your affair this week. GPS logs, hotel receipts, security footage. We stayed silent for Emma's sake. But in court, everything will be public. The color drained from Rachel's face. She turned to Mark for support, but he just stared at the floor. I knew they both understood there was no easy way out now. I slipped the tablet back into my bag and stood. This is just a warning. You still have time to consider an out-of-court settlement. But if you choose to fight me, be ready. No one responded. As David and I walked out the door, the only sound was the steady ticking of the wall clock in the heavy air. And I knew tonight, Mark and Rachel wouldn't sleep. Only 3 weeks after the confrontation, and my financial counterattack news began to spread through the small community where my ex-in-laws lived. Paul, once the chairman of a major maritime services company, couldn't hide his disappointment in Mark. When all the evidence of the affair came to light, he immediately fired Mark. Not only that, he refused every plea from his son, bluntly stating, if you want to make a living, get a job like everyone else. Don't expect to cling to this family anymore. With no safety net, Mark was forced to take a grueling job loading cargo on a fishing vessel off the coast of Alaska in brutal weather, working 16-hour days. A friend of mine told me that after just 1 month, Mark had visibly lost weight. His skin was sunburned, and his hands were calloused. But that was only the beginning of what he had to endure. Rachel's downfall was just as harsh. After the court granted David full custody of Emma, she was disowned by her family and had no one willing to help. With no degree and no experience, Rachel could only work as a waitress at a roadside diner, low pay, erratic hours. From a woman who once dressed in luxury, she was now in a wrinkled uniform, hair tied back hastily, living in a cramped apartment with rent always overdue. Emma, in contrast, seemed freed from an invisible cage. Her radiant smile returned. She focused on her studies and joined several school clubs. One weekend afternoon, as David and I sat with her in a cafe near her school, she suddenly said, Aunt Natalie, I want to learn Spanish and Japanese. I want to translate your books into many languages so kids everywhere can read them. I froze for a second, then smiled. In that moment, I knew the past wounds had shaped her into a strong, dream-filled young girl. As for me, my health was improving beyond my doctor's expectations. Recent checkups showed my heart responding well to the treatment plan. My doctor even said that if all went smoothly, I could return to a completely normal life next year. That news felt like a surge of energy. My writing career was also at its brightest. My children's comic series was not only a domestic bestseller, but had also been nominated for an international award. The film deal was officially signed with the first animated series set to premiere next summer. One evening after I finished a new manuscript, David stopped by the hospital. He brought a bouquet of blue hydrangeas, my favorite, and a small box. When I opened it, a beautifully crafted silver ring shimmered under the warm light. David looked straight into my eyes, his voice deep and steady. Natalie, we've gotten through the hardest days together. I want to spend the rest of my life protecting you and building everything with you. Will you marry me? I stayed silent for a few seconds, feeling my heart pound, not from illness this time, but from emotion. Images of my journey flashed through my mind, from a betrayed wife, a patient fighting each day, to an independent, successful woman holding her own future. I smiled gently, taking his hand. Let me think about it, but I believe my answer will come soon. David didn't push. He only squeezed my hand lightly. Outside the window, the city lights reflected on the lake, sparkling, as if signaling a new beginning. I knew that no matter what my final answer would be, I had already won, not in the game of revenge, but in reclaiming my worth and happiness. Natalie's story proves that betrayal doesn't have to be the end, it can be the catalyst for rebirth. From a wife abandoned in the midst of illness, she rebuilt her life with resilience, regained her dignity, found remarkable success in her career, and discovered true love. In real life, anyone can face betrayal or be underestimated, but it's how we rise, set boundaries, and stay committed to our own worth that shapes the outcome. Natalie chose to win through independence and self-respect. What do you think about Natalie's journey to overcome betrayal and reclaim happiness? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and meaningful family stories ahead.